stage. I call on Deputy Brid Smith to move for.
I move Mullen on Bill Sherivishi Privelege agus on Chanail Privelege Carta Ibraha Gavila is the shock day, the Public Service and Procurement Workers' Rights Bill 2017. Briefly, Cian, I want to introduce this bill and in simple terms to address what I think is a major issue that has struck me since I entered Dáil Éireann as a TD. I've been contacted repeatedly by workers whose employers either refuse to recognise their unions or refuse to pay into a pension scheme or refuse to abide by a registered employment agreement or all of the above. And this in itself is not unusual. The growth of precarious and low contract hours that has mushroomed during the recession is not what surprises me or worries me, nor is it the ability of some employers to justify bogus self-employment ruses. It is the fact that this state is actually complicit in many of these practices. The state dispenses through its procurement policies and contracting for services, directly and indirectly, billions of euro every year, and yet it takes no real responsibility as to what kind of conditions, what kind of pay or rights that the workers who do the work for those companies are subjected to. And beyond the very minimal legal rights afforded by legislation, the state seems to have no interest as to what happens to workers in companies it hires to carry out various practices or to provide various services. And I believe that has to end. And this procurement bill is about trying to start the process of ending this issue and to address the wider issues at its heart. The bill states that a public body in procuring services or contracts can have regard to wider concerns other than simply the most economic advantageous tender known, the word is known as meat, other than the most economic advantageous tender. And that means that a public body, when using public funds, has to have regard to wider social and economic good for the country. It seeks two different categories of thresholds: to raise the bar in terms of workers' rights and to say that the state has a responsibility to ensure that employers who have the highest standard of employment rights are not at a disadvantage when seeking public contracts. So it seeks to remove competition in terms of wages and working conditions among bidders for public contracts and to stop the state, therefore, colluding, whether deliberately or by accident, in a race to the bottom in terms of workers' rights. It specifically says that companies with a history of abusing workers or denying them the right to organise and be recognised as members of a trade union, or where it fails for the previous 3 years to abide by a WRC decision, those companies should be denied the right to enter into any tender for contracts from the state. And it goes beyond these minimal steps and says that the public contracting bodies should weight tenders in a way that will positively advantage those companies that do in fact allow union recognition, that do pay a living wage and that do ethically source their goods and services and do not use low-paid and precarious contracts. So just a few examples, and why I started by saying I've been approached consistently by people and workers who this has failed. Viking Direct supplies this Dáil with a lot of material, and Viking Direct recently made their workers redundant because it wants to move to a lower paid type engagement, which is much more profitable for them. They're not unprofitable, indeed they make lots of profits, but they wanted to move to a much different lower wage economy. And they would not negotiate with their workers, the union that recognised their workers, in terms of the redundancy that they're receiving. Now, I don't believe, Cian Corla, that this state should support those sort of actions. Conduit and the Minister for Climate Change and the Environment will know about this. Another company that was recently awarded a lucrative contract for the emergency call-out service. This contract was actually awarded to British Telecom. They subcontracted to Conduit. I brought this to the Minister for Communications and I brought to him the fact that they absolutely point-blank refuse to recognise those workers' rights to join a trade union. They will not go to the WRC, they will not deal with the union, and yet we're supporting that company. Another case recently came to my attention. An employment order was passed by the state for security services to allow for a small wage rise to €11.05 an hour. The state passed that order, and yet 40 security companies have flatly refused to increase workers' wages and have said that they're going to take a court case against the state to overturn that order. Now, I believe that some of the security companies that are being used by local authorities, one of them being Top Security, is among those who are refusing to pay this pay increase. So the state should not be financially rewarding those who are actively seeking to usurp basic attempts to give workers security, a decent wage and a right to be recognised by trade unions. So I recommend the bill to the House.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the bill being opposed? Therefore, the motion for leave to introduce is agreed, and I would ask Deputy Smith to move that the second stage be taken in private members' time.
I so move.
Agreed? Agreed. Now we move on to votes, and the first one is the motion read trade and foreign investment postponed